Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Brendan Hauser with EVOQ Bike. We've got Liam Flanagan from Skyline Racing on the podcast today. I actually crossed paths with Liam when we were riding up Grandfather Mountain here in North Carolina, and we were talking about just his upcoming year. If you've looked up his racing on Pro Cycling Stats, he was in Greece, Ireland, Romania, all over the place. And it was really interesting to hear some of these stories of how they've pieced things together and what life is kind of like on the road when you're doing 50 UCI races. I think he had 70 race days, maybe more. And just how do you manage the training season versus the racing season? And then all the nitty gritty things in between. We didn't really get in as much on specific training topics because there was just so much to cover of the race life. And maybe that's the name of the podcast, the Conti race life. Liam, thanks for doing this, man. And we'll have to get back on another one at some point, hear about how the races went, how the VO2 in the base ended up going for you, and Liam touches on why they're doing that, and just some other really good tidbits. So everybody, good luck with your training and racing. Give them a holler on Instagram and Strava, and we'll talk to you soon. And as you know, it is trainer season, so if you need a trainer, check out our post on the Cyc Plus. There's a $200 off coupon, and if we can help you with anything, reach out. Good luck. See ya. Man, thanks for
Absolutely.
connecting. I'm
Yeah.
excited to kind of continue the conversation that we had on the bike, which was great.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
let's just jump into a quick intro so people know who you are. Who are you? Who you riding for? Where are you calling in from?
Yeah. So my name is Liam Flanagan. This will be my second year riding Conti with Team Skyline. I'm 24, so I mean, in the cycling world, some call me old, which is it's an interesting. Yeah, it's interesting. Um, but yeah, definitely living the dream. Like I get to travel the world and race my bike, and that's been the dream since I could balance on two wheels, and yeah, making it happen. And yeah, there's all the ups and downs, but I think that's kind of that's the beauty of it.
I love that. Where you told me on the bike, where did you start riding the bike when you were really little?
Oof. So like when I was very very little, uh, my dad used to like go on runs, and I'd like follow him on my little Schwinn bike. And then when I was like I was 9, we went over and watched the tour, which was like, I mean, it was crazy.
Because you were living in France.
Not yet. So
Oh, not yet.
we were living in California at the time.
Ah, I
So
didn't
we were
know
in
that.
Corona del Mar. And then we went over, just my dad and I, and followed the tour. Like I think we watched like 14 of the 21 stages. And we even we went and we we saw Lance going up. I think it was near Annecy at I think it was up the Madeleine or something. But he came up and like shot this Live Strong video, and I feel like got my helmet all sideways, and I'm like, but it went on Live Strong and got like millions of views. So like as a young kid, like everyone's like Liam, Liam, and I thought, oh, I just thought it was so cool, like pretending that I'm in the race, going up these climbs with all the people, and it's like it's just magical. And then yeah, we moved to France a couple years later. So when I was like 10, 11, and just yeah, we were supposed to go for a year, and then that turned into 2, and then eventually 8. So yeah,
Wow.
we were there for basically while I grew up, and like I mean, cycling over there, it's like the Tour de France is their Super Bowl, so it's like
Mhm.
just yeah, it was just really special. So yeah, that's how I picked up the sport basically.
Do you still speak French?
I do, yeah.
Nice.
I actually yesterday I got my French visa, um, which is exciting. Dealing with that bureaucracy is always kind of hard, but got that, so that'll be cool. And technically, I'm actually eligible for the citizenship because it's like after 12 years old, like spending 5 years in the education system and speaking the language, and so I just have to establish residency. So that's probably something
Mm.
I'm going to do um, in the near future, which will be it's just helpful to have both, just whenever it's convenient.
Yeah, I was wondering, has that helped with the racing of, because I'm sure some Americans have a hard time getting over back, or is that not affecting it at all?
Um, I've definitely heard stories of it affecting people where like last minute, especially with like COVID and stuff. I think Lawson Craddock had a lot of trouble getting over to like Worlds in Australia or something,
Mm.
or I can't remember exactly what it was, but there's especially with like last year, So Americans going over, you have a 90-day period
Mhm.
over 180 days. You have 90 days that you can be in Schengen. So a lot of guys have to like, if you don't have a visa, you have to like really calculate your days. So like I was able to pull it off last year where essentially I had like a 3-month block from January to March. And then I came back over to the US, did the US block. So like Gila, Beauce, those races. So
Mhm.
then my 90 days reset. And then I went back over in the summer and what was there from July to September. Um, but
I had
that's
no
all.
idea Schengen was a thing. I messed that up. I had a 120-day trip planned because I was going to be in Belgium for school for 3 months,
Uh-huh.
and they were like, "Oh, dude, wait, what? How long are you going to be here? You can't do that." And I was like, "Wait, what are you talking about?" And so I ended up going to Croatia, and I went to Ireland to chop it up over
Hmm.
Thanksgiving another day. I had all these like plans. I was going to go watch these races, and they're like, "Yeah, no, that's not happening." I was like, "Oh, all right,
No,
damn,
it's a pain to deal with. And there's a lot of guys who uh like they've had to do a kind of a puzzle of days of like, okay, these are the races I have. I have to go back to the UK to reset the days or give myself more days. And
mm-hmm.
it's just having the visa it'll make it a lot easier.
Cool,
But it wasn't the hardest thing to get. It just takes time and you have to deal with a lot of paperwork and stuff, which is obviously annoying.
yeah."
Yeah.
Yeah. How many race days did you have last year to give some context to people? That was your busiest year, right? Like first
Yeah.
year really popping off, it
Hmm.
seemed.
Yeah. I had I think 62.
Yeah.
Um, I think 50 of them were UCI. It was like it was a lot of travel.
Hmm.
But I really enjoy that part, like going to new countries. Like I had a lot of firsts last year, which was, I mean, it was really cool. Like I think as a kid, I traveled a lot, more than most kids, I guess. Like we had kind of like being in France and like I have my godparents live in Switzerland and like that was really cool. But then getting to go to new countries like Greece, where we were there for 3 weeks and got like 11 days of racing, uh, went over to Ireland and did a lot of racing there, then went to Norway, came back to the States, went up to Canada. It was like, it was a lot of travel, but I mean, that's the part that I really enjoy is like going to new places and racing a lot. And it's definitely, it's one of those things where like I think it's a change in mindset from like you kind of have training season and race season, and you really have to make a distinction between the two. Because when you have so many race days and you're traveling so much, like that CTL number doesn't matter anymore. Like it's much better to like to come to a race slightly unfit but healthy rather than really really fit and having this great CTL but you're on the like your immune system's on the limit and you're about to get sick or you are sick and you're trying to train through it or race through it. And then with the travel on top of it, it's like I've watched guys like get to races slightly sick, try to do like VO2 intervals, and all of a sudden it's like they're off the bike for 2 months. And it's like
Mm,
that's a mistake that I mean I've made before. And you just kind of have to learn the hard way. Because it's so easy to fixate on that like CTL number. And when you're racing so much, there's a point where it just doesn't matter. You need to be able to adapt, and the stimulus from the travel doesn't go into that equation for
mhm.
CTL or fatigue or whatever it is. But that is stimulus that like I think it's one that's introduced by having so many race days, and like you're basically you race, you travel, and you need to recover from both of those things, not just the racing. Um, so yeah, it's been a really cool experience. Like I've really enjoyed it. I really like that kind of process of like switching your mindset where it's like, okay, training is like I get 3 to 4 months where I'm just like, I can get better. And I know I can get better using these numbers. And you control so many more variables, I guess. Whereas the racing is just like you introduce just chaos. It's like, okay, if I'm flying this much, I'm going to lose my bike at some point. Something's going to break.
Yeah.
You're going to get somewhere and like the one of the guys' flights got delayed, so you got to wait for him at the air. It's just like you can't. There's so many things that are out of your control at that point where you just kind of have to embrace it. And if you stress about it, it's going to be detrimental to your performance, I guess.
Is that your personality that you just go with the flow? Because I'm like myself, I'm thinking that would be sort of irritating, but or maybe if you just learn this, that this is how it goes when I'm gonna be racing 70 days outside of the U.S. Or how do you? What's going on up there?
Um, a lot of people ask that question. Uh, yeah, I don't know. I'm a cyclist, so probably, you know, yeah, that is kind of more my personality. Like I'm more of just go with the flow kind of guy. Very not much anxiety and stuff like that. So I guess that's to an extent it's a gift, but it can be quite annoying to people because my timeliness isn't exactly
Mm,
that's something I need to work on. Um,
okay.
but like it's also I think it's also my strength where like I feel kind of comfortable in the chaos. Like it's kind of enjoyable. Like I like I think, and I was talking to Johnny Clark about this. It's like you're trying to build all these experiences, and it doesn't matter if they're good or bad because they'll all be part of the story. And like, I think there's so many moving pieces to this, especially on a Conti team. It's like it, the cars aren't rented, like that's on us. And so it's like we're going as riders, we're picking up the cars, we're doing all these things where it's like you you can't just show up and you're like your role is a rider and you have to perform, but you've got all these other responsibilities that like they can be very stressful. Um, but it is what it is. And like with 70 race days in a year, it's like if my performance is down at one, it's okay. Like I have so many opportunities to kind of make up for that and get it right that like I'm not going to let the stress of one race or one thing that went wrong. Like we, it, it's one of those things where you just kind of got to go with the flow. And for me, I think it's a little bit easier. Just I've traveled a lot, and like even as a kid, like I'd get. I think the longest that I was in a single school was like a year, except for when I got to France. Once I got to France, we were
Wow.
kind of put in 8 years, but like I was all over the place. Like we were like as a family, we traveled so much, which was really cool. Like that's something that I really enjoyed, but I also got kind of comfortable with the like I guess the more variables that are out of control. I'm like, oh, whatever. Like, let's get a good coffee and see what happens. You know?
But I definitely want to talk about those Conti team responsibilities because I think listeners, but also some riders that think, "Oh, I'm a pro on a Conti team. Like, I'm just gonna show up and race." It's like, "Oh, dude, that's definitely not the case." Before we leave the traveling, though, what are maybe some tips that you've, besides going with the flow, that you've learned over the years of like from before to
Mhm.
cycling as a pro or now with all these race days? Like, what are some things that you helped the other guys maybe around you who are not as with the flow? It's like, yo, man, just try X, Y, and Z because it'll just create way less stress for you.
Well, I think the main thing is just uh, having your immune system be like take your multivitamins, take your vitamin C, slam the hydration because it's so easy to pick something up if your
Mm.
immune system is somewhat compromised. So that's like something I've really put an emphasis on where it's like have all your hydration packs and stuff. And like, if it feels better to wear a mask on the plane, wear the mask on the plane. Like, try to do everything that you can, like wash your hands, all that stuff. Like, it seems obvious, but it's like be on top of your health. And I think like trying to count how many flights I took this year, but it was a lot. Like, I think I went back and forth, like transcontinental 7 times, and then within Europe, I was like we were flying all over the place, and even here we were flying. Um, but it's just like things like that where it's so easy to pick up a little bug, and like you kind of owe it to your teammate to or your teammates to have a strong immune system so you don't get to the race and get everyone sick. And then like and it happens. You can get sick, and like at that point then just isolate. Do what you would want them to do for them. And just like kind of quarantine yourself and be transparent that like you are sick or you're not feeling so good.
I like that. I don't think anybody's ever said that on the podcast, and so I really like that. It's something that I've tried to take to heart. Of even I would notice, like if I'm tired, I'm like, oh, on a plane, I'm like, dude, don't touch your eyes. You just were walking through an airport, and so I think the hand, like, go back to basic
Yes.
germ stuff. Maybe be a little bit of a germaphobe. I love
Yeah,
that. I think that's
no, I think
super,
that's
super smart.
yeah, I think it's like it's one of the more under like you wouldn't really think about that. Like even
Mhm.
right now when I'm thinking about the season, like I'm really excited about all the racing we're gonna do and I'm looking at this calendar and it's awesome, but I'm not really thinking about like the small details of it. Like getting to the airport, like what's it gonna feel like? You're all like you feel nasty, you don't know where your Airbnb is. It's like but those are things that like you have to be ready for. And if you're not, it makes it really hard to come and perform at the races where like I mean the travel to get to these places is I mean it's a huge component of it. And it like it really throws kind of that it'd be like you're trying to do all this training, but then you've got to like every training ride you do, you've got to go to a different state and you've got to like and it just it makes it that that stimulus is I mean it's definitely there and you don't really think about it beforehand, I don't think. Like
Mm,
most people don't. It's like that's kind of the not the bad part, but it's the downside of it. And I think it's definitely important to take those steps and like think about what you're gonna do. How like every time you have a chance, wash your hands, like things like that. Where stay hydrated. Like it's uh, yeah, just go back to basics.
basics. When you're talking about the 3 to 4 months of training, hey, here's when I can get better.
Mhm,
What's the like broad brushstrokes of how you think of training during those points in time? Would you consider this
mhm,
base season? Do you just call it preseason? Like, how do
mhm.
you lay that out?
I think definitely base season. I I really like the kind of that process of starting like you're never like your whole career is kind of like this I guess it's like a work in progress like you're kind of building each season you're trying to build on seasons before and so for me like I get to so like right now I'm going to go to Girona and I've done that the last couple years but a lot most of the variables I can control and so I can start in November, December. And I can do this consistent amount, just ramping up the volume and getting like this year, I think we're doing things slightly differently, sprinkling in a little VO2 in, which has been very interesting. Um, and I'm like I'm liking it for sure. But I know that I can look at numbers like say it's my CTL, my 20-minute power, my whatever, and I can just feel and watch it grow, which is it's a special process, like using your body as like a that's your tool. That's what you work with. And like being able to gauge that growth, but comparison and reference is like yourself from before. And like I really enjoy that process of getting better and like consistent training translates. Like I feel like what I put into it, I can pretty much like I can't guarantee, but I trust my coach and I've watched the results happen every time I go over there and I have that 3 to 4 month block. Like I can physiologically I get better. And that's
Mm,
it's a special process. Like it's fun to watch and I can almost guarantee that the work that I put in, I will get out X amount. And now, if that X amount is enough to be at the level that I want to be, now that's different because now you have all these other variables, which are other riders and the chaos of racing. That's like numbers don't equal good racer, but at least in that kind of training mindset, you can watch those numbers grow, and that's I mean that's special. Like
mhm.
it's a cool process.
What's the best way that you guys see numbers grow? Do you test often, or do you do a lot of like intervals, just have graduated steps? Like, hey, 1 week you're doing 5x4, the next minute you're doing maybe the same duration and more watts, or
Mhm.
maybe you're doing 5x5, or what sort of a pattern are you like, okay? Because I
Yeah.
think sometimes it's for the listeners that might be new to training, they're like, I don't really know how do I know if I'm getting better? Like, yeah, there's the 20-minute test, but and
Mhm.
maybe that might be a marker. What's sort of
Yeah.
some of the things that you look for to be like, okay, the training's working?
Um, I think a huge one is the perceived exertion, and like
Mm,
I I use power, heart rate, and perceived exertion, and I think that kind of using those 3 data points, and, like, the more you train, the more I think you're in tune with your body and how you're feeling, and that perceived exertion becomes more of a factor. Like, so say one of the workouts that we do a lot is like a 2 by 20 and then an hour of tempo. And that 2 by 20, usually I love 2 by 20. Well, love it. It feels decent. And then that hour of tempo is just hell. Like, that is what I'm the worst at. And so being able to, like, gauging my perceived exertion and watching the power increase for the same effort, essentially. And like,
Mhm.
so like right now we're doing very low endurance stuff, and it's like, it's pathetic wattage. Like, it's so low, but you're watching for that same, well, I'm going off a heart rate right now. So for my heart rate's super high. So we're like keeping it capped, and then just watching, like, the first couple weeks I was doing it, it's like I can't even press the pedals. Like, if I press on the pedals, my heart rate goes way over the cap. So it's like getting around over the mountains here. It's like almost impossible. I'm crawling. But then we've done it for what, about a month now, or since I've been back, and it's like, okay, now I can almost get into my endurance zone
Mm.
at that heart rate. And it's like, okay, so you've watched, it might not be applicable to racing, but it's definitely, you can see that your engine is getting bigger. It's like, okay, you've got, for X heart rate, what was the wattage when we started? What is it now? And it's like, that's, I mean, if you are consistent and ramp up the volume, I can almost guarantee you that for the same heart rate, you will have a higher wattage. And
Mhm.
I think that's a pretty easy one to gauge. And that's, but it's also, you don't want to always be looking at your head unit. Just, it's kind of nice to be able to feel what the sensations are like. Like, if you have good legs, and like, it feels nice to be at endurance. Whereas like before it might not have, or it like felt like it was a lot more effort than it was. And I think being in tune with that, and just giving yourself like mental checks, like if it helps to journal, then journal. But I think just taking those like mental notes, and I think it is nice to write them down and like be able to go back. And like, a couple years ago, I remember, like, I was kind of frustrated at how low the power was for the wattage. And it's like, I go back and I look at some of the notes that I had on my training peaks, and it's like I had the same frustrations. And then it's like I look a month later, I'm like, never question the coach again. Like, never question Ben. Like, he was right. It came, and that's what's happening. And so it's like being able to kind of trust your coach in the process is, I think that's an important one. And yeah, that's kind of how I think about it.
That's awesome. When you're talking about being in tune with your body, can you, and this is a tough one because you kind of got to really think back.
Hmm.
How long into training until you could lean on those RPE feelings? Because the newer listeners, like I don't even know what, like they don't have the reference yet. They haven't trained long enough. Do you feel like it was maybe
Hmm.
like 3 years of riding seriously, 4 years? Like, and if you can't recall, it's no worries. I'm always just curious. Like when do athletes start to feel that they know their body?
Well, I think the tools that we have now with like power and heart rate are also like a really, they're a good way to like start that process.
Mm.
Because like, especially as a kid, I didn't have heart rate or power. And I know I used to like, like in France they'd be like, go at like tempo. I like, I used to be like, I think I'm going at tempo. I was way deep into threshold, just backing it off, like maybe a percent. And
Yeah.
for me, that was a 7. And but it's because I didn't have heart rate or power. I was just going. It was like, I'm going to go as hard as I can and then back it off just a little bit. That's a 7. But
Yeah.
that's like it. It really wasn't. And
It was
that
like
was,
8.5, we're saying.
yeah, exactly. No, I was
Yeah.
just going basically as hard as I could, minus 5 watts, and it was like, I thought
Love
I
it.
thought that I was at a 6,
Yeah.
and that's, and so for the like, I can just remember like training rides when I was a kid, just absolutely smashing when like I wasn't supposed to be. And
Hmm.
so it was like, that part was fun, but I don't think I was in tune with much of anything. Like I was way off on what I was supposed to be doing, but it was also like I was kind of just going off the feel. Like it felt good to go hard. Whereas like I think nowadays we understand more the benefits of going easy. And so I think having those like heart rate and power and things like that where you can like keep yourself in check, because I think a lot of people like going like kind of hard, and
Mhm.
they could like I could I could justify to myself that like a 280, 300-watt effort is anywhere between like a 4 and an 8. And like there's that huge range where it's like you it if you backed off 10 watts, it could be a 3, but if you went 10 watts more, it could be an 8. And it's like that zone where that's where it's kind of the beauty of like now you have to kind of figure out where you feel good, because everyone's different too. Like it's not all about wattage and heart rate. So it's like I think it definitely takes a few years, but it like especially as a kid, like I had no idea. I was just going out riding my bike, having fun, and
Yeah.
like I think that's also especially for like newer people like to the sport. Like when I'm descending in Banner Elk or things like that, I've got the biggest grin on my face, and like you can't wipe that thing off. And like that part of it is, I think that part's really important. And like you can't really quantify that in training, but there's a part of like the RPE that comes from that. I think like if you're enjoying it, it's going to feel a lot easier. And like I think that's something that like I've learned to appreciate over the years.
And when you are grinning, everyone else is absolutely terrified because the people that know how you descend will understand that. If you're in the area, look up the downhill KOMs. Liam has probably all of them. It is absolutely insane. Um, One thing that you said, you were like new to doing the VO2 and base, and you're liking that. What's feeling good
Mm.
with those vibes?
Um, Yeah, so we've been sprinkling in like a little bit of anaerobic work. Last year, I think my wasn't a complaint, but it was like the shift from like in the winter, kind of like the keeping the chain tight
Mhm.
intervals and things like that. Like they all felt good. The numbers were getting better, but it isn't as applicable to racing. So when I got thrown into the racing, it was like, uh-oh, like I haven't like that system that usually is my strength isn't really it's not firing. And it took
Mhm.
a few months of racing to be like, okay, I feel like I'm comfortable. When we start whacking it, it's like I can I can respond and it doesn't feel like I'm gonna die. Well,
Mhm.
it always kind of does, but
Yeah, I know
especially
what you mean.
but like it so we were talking about how and there's some studies, and uh, I'm not as informed, I don't think, but that my coach has been looking at. I work with Ben Sharp, and basically that sprinkling in a little bit of anaerobic work throughout a base season will help your overall base. And I do think that that is, especially for me, who's a little more explosive and like that, so like we're doing a lot of like 30-15s and things like that, where those efforts, I won't say they feel good, but they don't feel bad. Like when I do them, like for example, like on my Whoop, the night after I've done like that type of VO2 session, like my recovery's through the roof. It's like I have a higher HRV. I I feel good when I open the system.
Mhm.
Um, and so that I think that's been interesting. It's like, okay, so we're doing this heart rate capped, very mellow, chill, kind of just getting the miles in, and that that in itself has its difficulties and it's hard in its own way. Like you've got to be focused for well, semi focused for the whole time, and like you just go out and get the time in. And
Mhm.
that's I mean there's some really cool, I really appreciate that. Um but then the VO2 work, it's a totally different mindset that you have to have, and it's like it's very easy to kind of dread those sessions. But I think if you look forward to them and like don't put the pressure on yourself that you need, like especially this time of year, like you don't need to be hitting crazy numbers or anything. Let's just go out and get the system open. and see what that feels like. And I think it's kind of it's more of a compliment and not like a like they don't I don't think they go against each other, those two styles of training. And yeah, I mean, I so I am pretty close to Brent Bookwalter, who, uh, if anyone has a similar path to what I'm trying to follow, it's him. Who he went to Leeds McRae and he lives in Black Mountain here, and he's basically done it all. Like he had a 16-year career, and I mean, incredibly successful. Um, but like he's kind of had all those base seasons, all the philosophies that kind of have come with them. Like he's done a lot of motor pacing, not motor pacing, a lot of force, no force, high cadence, low cadence, all this stuff. And he's like, I think it's good to change year over year and like have a different stimulus than you did the year before. And when something worked, it's great. Do more of that, but also introduce a new stimulus. And I think um, yeah, it's kind of weird to be like it's November and you've got a couple of VO2 sessions and sprint sessions in the week, but it's like, I mean, I'm so excited to race. Like I'm like ready for it now. So it's like, I think it's kind of that instead of pushing on my endurance sessions that need to be held back, I can like these are sessions where I can go and like the point is to empty myself. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's no, so it's almost like on my endurance rides, like I'm like, I look at the low endurance and the power I'm supposed to be doing, and then it's like, oh, that's fine. Like I'm good doing that. Whereas if I didn't have the VO2 sessions, I'd be like, I want to do more power. I want to push harder.
Right.
I want to do this. Um, so we'll see how it plays out. Like this is the first time I've kind of sprinkled this in, but so far I'm really liking it.
Cool. That's awesome. We'll be excited to see how it turns out when the racing
Yeah,
starts, which is
for
not
sure.
far away. With the word chaos has come up a few times. Do you feel
Mhm.
like you feed off that as to why you're so good at the fast finish in the bunch, or what? How do you find yourself at the pointy end there in a lot of the big American races and what you're trying to do over in Europe now?
Yeah, I definitely say that it's like something that like I feel comfortable in the chaos. Now, the thing is like you get to a certain level and it's like every sprinter who's there has that same instinct but better. Or they have the experience where like I've been in say it's like maybe a dozen bunch kicks in UCI races. And it's like those guys who have hundreds of them stacked, all of a sudden it's a all the like little tricks that I use to move up and things and like crips or whatnot, like they're all you like once you get to the top 50, they're all using it. And so
Yeah.
it's like you have to find new things. So like I will say, like I do feel it it feels exhilarating and fun. And so like I very much enjoy it. It it's it's interesting because it's like so I won the U23 national championship in 2022. And that was like for 4 years, that was the goal. And I wanted to be the best U23 that I could be. And well, I was aiming for the road race and the crit and ended up getting third in the road race and I won the crit. But it was like I was trying, like, that was the goal for so long. And so it was like I was on the limit cornering and that to win that race, it was basically I whacked it as hard as I could with a K to go and just dive bomb a corner, sprint out of it, dive bomb a corner, sprint out of it. And like that, that was something that I felt I could do because I was the best at that in that field. Whereas now it's like, okay, now even my strength is technically a weakness or
Mm,
not a weakness, but relatively.
right.
So it's like I still haven't won a UCI race. And I mean, that's the goal. It's to podium and win a UCI race for 2025. I think I went from like at the beginning of the year last year, like I was in way over my head. Like in Greece, even a top 50 was like a good, like I remember I got like 39th at one of the races and I was like, okay, that's a good, like that was a good ride.
Mm,
And two, then at Gila, I got fourth and I had a shot at the win. And that was, but it was like a new experience, like in a UCI race. I had the same feeling that I've had at say U23 races or American national level races where like you look up, you see the finish line and you're like, that's mine.
Hmm.
And then getting to like at, at Gila on that crit, like I came out of that corner third wheel and I'm like, oh, this is mine. But then all of a sudden the sprinters are better. It's like a small mistake that I made. I tapped my brake just a little bit in that corner and that was the podium. It's just, I came in slightly too hot, put myself right in the position that I wanted to be in. And in a race like a U23 race, I would have won that race. But it's like, okay, now I'm sprinting against Kate Bickmore and Brody and those guys who, I mean, they're really good sprinters and Scott McGill and like, so it's like all of a sudden those little mistakes are like amplified because everyone's got the little tricks and whatnot that I use to like corner quicker and not touch my brakes and whatnot. So it's like I went from like a top 50 was like a good result to our getting more comfortable with it and like having that feeling of okay, I can like I'm here to win. And
Hmm.
that's I mean it's a that's the cool part of the process.
What are some of those tricks? And just be careful clicking your pen. Your mic's good
Oh,
enough to
sorry
pick
about
that up.
that.
No, it's
Sorry.
okay.
um
Yeah, give us some of the tricks that you guys use to move up, and just that you're like, this is has helped me get on the podium before.
Yeah, I think well one of my teammates, Kian, is like this big he owns this company called More Arrow and he's like all into the arrow, just like basically being as efficient as possible. And so he'll use the most like I, I've never he's just so efficient. It's insane. But just moving up through it, he'll like tap my thigh and it'll be like he'll be doing like 120 watts and we'll move up like 40 places and you're like thanks, buddy. Like, all right, that was
Yeah.
great. Um, but yeah, there's like, I think there's the the main thing to watch is like, okay, so say you're coming into a big corner. Um, now this is kind of it's hard to put into words, but it's like there's times where you can dive bomb and there's times where you can't. And I think you can only do it so many times to the same person. So like
Mm.
if you're gonna dive bomb a corner, you better not come back to where you were in the bunch because that person's gonna chop you right back. And like so that's like okay,
Explain to people. Some people might not know what that means. So just give a quick explanation of like, the group's going
mhm,
through and everyone sort of has their line, and
yeah.
explain what a dive bomb would be.
So you've got the road. Say we're coming to a right hand bend. The line is outside into the apex, outside essentially. So as you come into with a big peloton, you come into the corner, and most of the people are going to be to the outside, and there's going to be a gap that's however big it is on the right side of the road. If you basically, as everyone's under braking, you basically just shoot up the inside and find a space to slot yourself in, and that's there's times where you can do that and times where you really can't. And it it depends how much energy you can save because coming out, if you go inside, 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 you're obviously not going to come out of the corners fast. So you're going to have to kick really, really hard. But there's times where like you have to do that to make up the spots. But I think the it's like interesting because there's like times where you can't do it and it's
What goes
just
wrong
kind of
when you can't do it?
uh it's like if especially when people are very good, there's no space. Like people are going outside, cutting the apex outside. If you try to go inside, 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 someone's gonna like you're gonna cut someone off and you're gonna
Hmm.
crash. Like it's
Hmm.
and I think that's kind of an instinctual thing where it's like you either take that risk or you don't. And I think that's also one of the things is like if you kind of get desperate, it's like that's when issues happen. Um, and as you get better, it's like everyone knows that trick. It's like everyone knows that someone's going to try to dive bomb. So like if a train is leading the pack, their sweeper will cover the inside. And so like I mean, I'm sure people have watched like Legion race crits or things like that. They'll do it a little bit. Sometimes it's a little bit too aggressive, but it's like they'll have their train and they'll have their sweeper come all the way out and put someone into a barrier, and it's like, all right, like but that's how they protect their like the train that's there.
Mhm.
And you're basically protecting that inside line so that no one even thinks about dive bombing. Um, and that's like there's times where you can do it. Like if you come through a corner and that apex is totally free, go through. Like if the door's open, the door's open. But then as you kind of get into climb the ladder and get better and better, it's like all of a sudden everyone knows that like we're not going to let that door open. Like, and so then you just have to be a little bit smarter of like, okay, I gotta one, be more efficient. I've gotta like stay in the wheels. Like you can't afford to like every time you make that effort to get back into like you get out of the bunch and get back into it. It's like, yeah, it's hard. But I think one of the things also that is really important is to like know the course, know how to get around the course as efficiently as possible without like your brakes. I mean, they're your friend, but they're also like they're your worst enemy. They're the thing that if you're braking too much in a corner and having to jump out of it however much harder, like that's at least for me, that's the main place where I can save energy. I can be as efficient as possible. Um, and I think being able to like, and I have some of my teammates like Jack McElhaun. This kid, he's a phenom, but he's like so dialed with all his stuff. He's got his like road book, fellow viewer, and whatnot. And like the night before the race, we'll be reconning like the last 10K or whatever, and all the climbs and the run into the climbs. But I think that part, like kind of being a good study, is that's kind of an underrated thing. Like knowing the finishes, um, those things like, okay, where can you save as much energy as possible? Can I, like in a crit, basically every lap around the outside is faster and I can make up spots. But in the last lap, I will never be on the outside of a corner because the speed is just higher. And if you slide out, they're going to the outside. So it's like you can be outside, outside, outside. But when it comes down to like it's time to race, you you have to be on the inside. And so it's
Mhm.
like things like that where you're just, yeah, I mean it's the part that I really enjoy and I love about racing because it's not it's not like it's not like an exact science at all. Every race is a little bit different. How you get into the break is different at every race. How you win the sprint is different at every race. And you're like taking all these data points and experience and kind of compiling it into what's how you race and your instincts. And someone could ask you like, why'd you do that? And it's like, I don't know. Like I'm I just did. Like I
Yeah.
had a split second to react and I did. Closest thing.
The That's real. I think the knowing the course is definitely underrated, and it's good. I was going to ask you like how much before the race do you guys dig into that? So knowing you guys look through like the night before in Bellevue, you're not waiting because if it's not a crate, you don't get to ride the whole road race course obviously.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting to hear. I don't think a
Mhm.
lot of people talk about that, and it's definitely not a strong suit of mine. That's for sure.
It's yeah, I think it's interesting because and there's a little bit of pushback to it as well because like people will have VeloView or like the DSs will have it in the car and in .2 races you don't have radios, which makes it in my opinion better because it's like, oh, there's a pinch point in a bridge and they're going to race full gas to this bridge and it's like there's 140K to go. It's like everyone's DS is telling them to be top 10 wheels. You've got 180 guys trying to get to this bridge first. And it's like, that's not even like it basically, we race to the bridge, we get over the bridge and then it stops. And it's
Yeah.
like, okay, like what was that for? And it's like
Hmm.
everyone had reconned it and knew that there's like in the road book, there's like a pinch point here or bridge or whatever. And it's like, okay, like that was unnecessary. But I mean, I guess it's bike racing. Like it's you don't do it doesn't make sense. Like most of the time, it's like, what is going on? Like,
Yeah, the sociology of the bike race is not always like common sense. That's a good
no,
point.
no, it's
Let's talk about the Conti responsibilities as you've kind of grown into the Skyline team and now having experience of having all these races last year. Just to shine some light of, you know, you guys work on getting sponsors, work with the budget? I'm sure every team is different. Some directors are probably super involved, others are probably less involved. You guys might have different responsibilities team to team. What's that life like?
I mean, it's like a it's unique and special, and it's like so at Skyline I mean the opportunities I've had are just amazing. Like the schedule that I was able to race last year is like if I had told myself that was what it would be before, I would have been thrilled. Like and I am like it was really awesome opportunity. Now uh we definitely gained a lot of momentum. Like we had the first team wins with the team. So Con won at Tour Bos, and then we won Tour of Sekerland in Romania. And like those are like their UCI races. It was huge. Like that was awesome. We won like some young riders jerseys. I got a KOM jersey at Bos. So it was just like, I mean, it was an awesome year. Just and we're basically like the last part of the year we'd show up at so we did Perry Shoney and Houtland. So it's like you've got all the team buses, you got DSM, Arkea, all the like the world tour teams with the buses and the cars and everything. And we roll up in a little like enterprise rental van, and one of the kids that was stagiairing he came up from France with his car. And so it's like a little golf in an enterprise van, and then it's like all the team buses and then us. And so
That's amazing.
like like that part was cool. Like I mean there's definitely the funding part is very hard because it's like right now it's on us as riders to make it what we like to pursue this dream. And the our management and staff are behind us and they want to see us succeed. But we kind of came in and um, the program was what it was a couple years ago, where they raced a few UCI races and then just like basically did some racing in March, April, took a break, and then did Maryland Cycling Classic in September. And then they signed riders like Con and Adam, who, I mean, they're seasoned pros. Like they're just so good. And I mean, it's humbling to watch and like be a part of and grow and learn from those guys who've been at this level for 5 to 8 years. Um, and they know what to do. Like they know with a small budget how to make it work. Um, and so that's where like right now we have very little to no funding. And so it's up to the riders to go out and find basically it's either obviously the dream is to get a whale who understands what we're doing and is passionate about it and sees Skyline or basically comes in and becomes the title sponsor, and we're this rolling billboard, and we're like the underdogs going up against the world tour teams and this and that, and like that's the dream. But then the reality right now is that we're piecing together race by race. So it's like each rider has a responsibility. So, like, for example, right now I'm working on Gila and securing funding for that 10 days. So it's basically per week of racing, the ballpark it costs about 7 grand. And so we're like going per race, just trying to piece together the calendar that way. So I mean, that's a stress in itself because I mean, I have a newfound respect for people who fundraise full time, but it's like I sent so many emails and just nothing. Or if I get a response back, it's like, I mean, sounds like a cool opportunity, but can't like
Mm-hmm.
can't do it. Um, I mean, and we've had a little bit of success here and there, but it's really about piecing it together that way. And I mean, it's I think it's also I do think it's a a good part of like understanding how the backside of things work and not
Mhm.
just like our job is racer, but I think it's a lot more than that. Like y- y- having this responsibility isn't a bad thing, and understanding like if I had just been given it all and just like my job is to get to the start line and perform, like it's a cool thing as well, but I wouldn't have like the whole like understanding like how this whole circus works. Like it's it's like a cool opportunity, and it's also we get to make it what we can make it, and that opportunity is quite unique and special. It's like, I mean, we got this invite to race in the UAE, and so we're going to open our season in January, uh, tour of I think it's Sharjah,
Yeah.
and so we're like we'll be doing that, and like I've never been to the UAE, like that'll be so cool.
It's gonna be so sick.
No, exactly, like I've that, and that's something I really feel like it gets me excited. It's like racing in new places and meeting cool people and going cool places. And like the bike is, I mean, that's my like, that's how we can do it all. And like cycling, that's the beauty of the sport of cycling. Um, yeah, we're just trying to pull it all together. Like each of us, like technically I like my title is like the sponsorship coordinator. So
Mhm.
yeah, so then someone's in charge of like Adam's in charge of race invites and things like that. And then like we made the sponsorship proposal and all that stuff. So it's like on the back end, we're doing quite a lot of work. Um, I will say there's the challenge of like it was easier to do it. Actually, it was very easy. It was just kind of like schoolwork. It's like a school project where you're making these presentations and giving them and making phone calls, writing the emails, all that stuff. And during my off season, that was actually like it was kind of nice to have a not a purpose, but yeah, let's just say it's a
Yeah.
purpose. Um, but then you get back on the bike, and it's like all of a sudden you need to put priority on recovery and training and doing that stuff where that additional stress doesn't necessarily contribute to being a better rider. So like for me, it's like basically in the morning, I'll give myself an hour, hour and a half, work on it, do what I can, but then I just drop it. It's like I'm not going to even stress or worry about it. Now my job is rider, get in my 4 or 5 hours, come back, get my protein shake, and I'm like I'll check my emails and things like that, but I'm not gonna. There needs to be somewhat of a distinction of like, okay, that's both are my responsibility, but I need to like I can't be mediocre at both. I need to
Mhm.
I need to do each of them well, and like the rider part, I know how to get better, and it's like the continuous process of getting like I'm not where I want to be, and it's always going to be an evolving thing. But with the sponsorship thing, it's so uncertain, and you have very little to no control over responses and who gets back to you. So you can just like stressing over it is it's going to be detrimental to your training and stuff. So it's like, how do you balance that? Um, so that's been an interesting part. That's been new for me. Um,
Did other riders do this for last year's calendar to get all to like to Ireland and to Greece and to all those other places?
not not really, not to the
Okay.
extent. Actually, one of them, Chaz, who has been with the team for a few years, has been very involved with that stuff. Um, so we, uh, I mean, the back of it was that essentially a lot of money was promised um last year, and then our DS and team owner basically fronted all the money,
Mm,
which is like, I mean, it was I mean, I'm super appreciative for it. Like the opportunities he gave us were amazing, but it's like it's not sustainable.
right.
He can't just, especially if we're doing 10 race days a year, that is, yeah, he can throw out however much that is. But it's like all of a sudden we've got an operation that at a minimum, it's like 400 grand to be able to just operate. It's like he can't front that money. And
Mhm.
so that's one of the things where like we've got to find a way to become sustainable. And that's one of the things where like eh, we've, and then after he was, I mean, Tashi's been amazing. He's basically, I think he traveled like 200 days last year and was with us, and he's got a job of his own. So it's like that's not involved with bike racing, and like he does this because he's passionate about it. And so it's like, okay, now we need to figure out a way to make this sustainable and make it so that, and so we've as riders, basically we've relied on friends, family to like reach out and try and see if we can fund a block in Greece or a block here, a block there. So we did have like the season last year. The team had budget for up until Bose. Like that was good. We sponsorship money, things like that. Now after Bose, that was like originally we weren't even supposed to do any of those races, and then Adam Khan, everyone was like we want to race, like we're here to race, and like so we got into all these cool races, like we did. Started at Classica in Spain, and then went to KBE in France, then went over for a month in Romania, and then did a month in Belgium. And so like that was basically that was kind of the piecing it together. Like I mean, I remember we got to Romania, and it's like we got a phone call like we have no money, like so we didn't know where we were gonna stay, and so we're all like making phone calls and stuff, and then finally we ended up like getting this little Airbnb in Timisoara, and it ended up being really good. Like we called in like a bunch of, I mean, like just called basically everyone I know, and like ended up getting like a DS. It ended up being one of the best trips we've had. Like Tour of Romania was so cool. Like we had like Lindsay, our DS was amazing. And then we had this Philippe, who's a Romanian guy, and his wife come out, and they were Swannied for us all week and basically like drove all throughout Romania. And like and Doru was the Swanee who used to be a Swanee for Cofidis, and like, oh, it's just amazing. Like it was so good, but it went from like nothing to piecing this thing together. And that's kind of, I mean, that's kind of been how we're doing it. It's like, we're all trying to pursue this dream, and we're making a way to like, we're all in, like, yeah,
Yeah.
it's,
It's gonna be super rewarding when the results come and you look back at all the work that you guys have put down to make it happen. So
yeah, I
like
think
you said,
so.
it wasn't just given to you and you had to show up. You like really putting in the work on many fronts. What's the man, this is really interesting, and I appreciate all the thoughts of like just the team vibe coming up as where you're at in life of being
Mhm.
24, and I think just being fully committed. You're a guy that has a degree that you can fall back on, but you're still
Mhm.
full on in the racing, and I think it's gonna be really exciting for people to follow along and watch you this year and see where everything goes. So it's gonna be kicking off in the UAE. Do you know where you're going
Yeah.
from there?
So I'm going to be based in Girona. I'll basically just be living there training. And we go to the UAE. There's a chance that we get into a Lula tour, which would be really
Okay.
cool. That's in Saudi Arabia. Um, if we don't do that, there's a chance that we get into Tour de la Provence, which is just a stage race in a dot one and 2.1 in France. If not, if we don't do that in February, we'll start, or the next race will be Greece. So we'll go to the
Okay.
island of Rhodes, and we'll be there for 3 weeks. So there's South Aegean Islands tour, GP Rhodes, which is a 1 day, and then Tour of Rhodes, which is a 5 day.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
so that's where I started my season last year, and I think that'll be a good goal to, like, performance wise. That's where the first like pressure will come, where it's like, okay, I have a benchmark of what I did last year, and it's very similar stages, and now I'll know the courses, finishes, all that stuff. I'll know what the competition's like, and coming into it with a little more confidence than I did last year. I think that's the confidence comes with the experience, and having done the race before, I think that'll help a lot. Because last year I didn't know what to expect. Like
Hmm.
it was like I was in over I was in over my head, and it was like now I've had significant a lot of race days at this level, and I know the guys who were winning last year, and it's like they're definitely better than me. but I can see myself getting to that level. And I think that'll be a cool process to see where I'm at. And it's also that, like, I have so many race days. It's like if it doesn't come together in Greece, we've got a whole year to figure it out. And it's like my coach says, it's like you're playing whack-a-mole. It's like identify a weakness and kind of just get it, and then something else pops up like that. It's like
I like that
that's how
analogy. That's good.
it's like the training analogy. So right now my it's fatigue resistance.
Get it.
Bash that
Whack
thing.
that.
You know?
I'm gonna put your Instagram handle in here so people can follow along there. What's
Cool,
do you
awesome.
blog, tweet, any other social media, Strava? Where else can people follow along this year?
Usually Strava is where I put all the pictures and all that stuff, and like
Cool.
every once in a while I'll have a funny joke. I'll like ride 69 miles or something and be like, nice. You know?
Nice.
You know?
Oh man, that's funny. On that note, Liam, thanks for doing this, man. This is really good
Hey, it was great.
insights. And everybody, good luck with your training and racing. Hit him up on Instagram, Strava for some jokes, and we'll definitely be rooting for you guys. Good luck, everybody, and we'll talk to you soon.